In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to create and export an R Markdown file within RStudio in a fair amount of detail. But first, I'm going to turn to Microsoft Word for a quick discussion of why it is that an R Markdown file is useful to us. So imagine that I'm creating some kind of project report or research article. I might turn to Microsoft Word to do that. So let me fill in a little bit of what I might write in that situation. And now, as you can see, I have put some information here into Microsoft Word to show how I might start some kind of research report that I might be writing. And then let's say after an introductory section, maybe I wanted to create a section called Data Analysis. And now I've created the start of that new section called Data Analysis, where I might present some of the analysis that I've done related to the data that I'm analyzing. So if I'm going to create this document in Microsoft Word, but if I'm going to do my data analysis in a different software like RStudio, I probably need to copy and paste everything that I'm doing from RStudio into Microsoft Word, which is kind of tedious. Just now, what I did, and what you can see the results of on your screen, is I went to RStudio, I created a two-way table, and then I took a screenshot of that two-way table and I pasted it here in Microsoft Word. It was a pretty lengthy process, and if I wanted to repeat the process to add different charts or tables, or if some of my data changed, I would have to repeat this entire process many, many times, rather than just having Microsoft Word change automatically for me each time I make a change in my research process. And this is where we turn back to RStudio, where we can create what's called an R Markdown file. An R Markdown file will allow us to integrate all of our work together in one place, both plain text, such as this that I'm highlighting now, that you might write within Microsoft Word, as well as R code and the results of that code. We'll integrate all of that together here in RStudio. Now, as I demonstrate this process, I encourage you to pause the video anytime you would like, and you can also follow along on RStudio in your own computer to create your own R Markdown document. So the first thing we'll do is we'll open a new R Markdown document, and I'll show you two ways that you can do that in RStudio. So the first is you can click here in the toolbar where my mouse is. You'll get this drop-down menu, and then you can click on the third option here, which is R Markdown. And I won't do that right this moment because I'll show you the other way to do it. Another way is to go to File, New File, and then R Markdown. And then what you'll do is you'll click here on R Markdown, and this will not be demonstrated in the video, but when you click on R Markdown, if this is your first time using R Markdown, your computer might ask you if you want to install some packages on your computer. So once again, I'll repeat, this is not going to be demonstrated in the video, but it's important for you to know that once you click on this saying that you want a new R Markdown file, your computer might ask you to install some stuff. And you should click yes. A little window will pop up, and you should click yes to install those additional packages or features that are needed. Now I have clicked on R Markdown in the menu, saying to the computer that I want a new R Markdown file. And for me, since all of the packages are already installed, this is the window that comes up. And this is the window that should come up for you eventually once everything is installed on your computer. And then in the future, this is the exact process you should see. And I'll demonstrate it again. So what I can do is I go here, R Markdown, then this window pops up. So I'll go ahead and put whatever I would like here. So I'll say R Markdown example for title. Let's say our name is going to be Markdown Learner. Okay, any arbitrary name. Now, go ahead and leave the default output format as HTML, the first and default option, and go ahead and click OK. And when I did that, this is what I got. So at the top, in the first 6 lines, we have what's called a header. It's technically called a YAML, or YAML header. And in this header, we have 4 items. We have a title, which is the same title that we just wrote down on the window before. We have the author that I wrote. We have today's date, and we have an output format. Now, these headers don't have to stay like this. They can be modified. And so as you continue to work in R Markdown, you might learn about other ways to modify this header to help you customize the type of document that you're creating. But for now, we'll just leave our header like this. But keep in mind that you can change anything within these green quotation marks in the title, author, or date sections of the header. So you can change those anytime that you would like. Okay, the next thing we'll do is let's save this file before we do anything else. So what we'll do is we'll click on this Save button where I have my mouse, and we'll give it whatever title we would like. And I recommend that you save the file within whatever folder or working directory that you plan to use for your data analysis on your computer. So I'm going to click the Save button now. Just now, what I did is I clicked the Save button, and then a window popped up on my computer asking me what title I wanted to give this new file and where I wanted to save it. And what I did is I saved it in this folder I've created, this folder called Project 1, which is on my computer, and that's going to be the directory, the folder on my computer from which I do my work today. And I gave this file a name. I gave it the name Example R Markdown Jan 2021. And you can see that that file has been added to the folder in which I saved it, so that's why you can see this file name here in the bottom right of the screen where my mouse is. And you can also see that in the top left Files viewer, the title that I gave it has been added up here to this tab. So this file has now been named appropriately and it has been saved. Now let's say I make a small change to this file. I'll just put a space here. So now I made a change to the file. Now the file name in this tab here has become red. I'm going to save the file, and now it became black again. So I'm pointing that out because it's a reminder to you that anytime you see this name in red, you should go ahead and click the Save button. You always constantly want to be saving your work every time you make a change. Now it's time to look at some features of this R Markdown document that we just created. So one interesting thing is that unlike a new Microsoft Word document that you might open, an R Markdown document, when you open it brand new, it already has some stuff inside of it for you. So the first thing it has is what we see here in lines 8, 9, and 10. This is a chunk of code, and we'll talk a lot more about those later. But this is a chunk of code that RStudio has put into your file for you to help the file work correctly as you continue to add to it and as you export the file in the future. So my advice is just to not touch lines 8, 9, and 10. Just leave them alone. Start your work from line 11. Then below line 11, you'll see that some example text has been added for you. This is just for you to refer to in case you would like an example of the capabilities of an R Markdown document. So in the future, anytime you make a new R Markdown document, this text will be there. But since today in this video, we're going through everything step by step, for now, let's delete everything below line 11. So if you're following along on your computer, please also delete everything below this setup chunk right here, and I'm going to do that right now. Now that I have deleted the text that was below line 11, I can save my work as you just saw me do, and then what I'll do next is I will insert what we call an R code chunk, and this is something that you're going to do a lot as you work with your R Markdown files. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here where my mouse is at the top. I'm going to click on Insert, and then the letter R, very first option, and boom. In lines 12, 13, and 14 in my file, I have a new gray area, and that gray area is called an R code chunk. And I can put R code into these gray areas, and the computer will know, okay, the user is giving me some code in this area, rather than some plain English text. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to type some code into this code chunk. Now let's go through the code that I just typed. After, of course, I save my work. There we go. So in line 13, I added a setwd command to tell the computer where I'm going to be working from, which folder I'm going to be using on my computer, and where I'm going to keep any data that I'm using for analysis and any output that is generated by my analysis process and by this R Markdown file. So that's line 13. In line 14, I'm just saying for the computer to check if the read Excel package is on the computer or not, and to install it on my computer if it's not already there. In line 15, I'm loading the read Excel package, and in line 16, I'm telling the computer to open the sample data food sales Excel file into R, load it into R, and call it D. That's what I like to name my data because it's easy to remember and easy to type. Okay, so now I'm going to demonstrate a few ways that you can run this code within an R Markdown file. So just like with an R script file, you can run each line of code one at a time if you would like. And the way to do that is to put your cursor on the line you want to run. So now I have clicked on line 13. Note that you do not need to highlight the text. All you need to do is put your cursor anywhere on the line that you want to run. Then go up here to the Run menu and click Run Selected Lines. And you'll see that in the console, it has now run the line of code that I selected. It also smartly ran any previous lines of code that might be important to the functioning of the document. So it ran line 9 for us, and then it also ran 13 like I asked it to do. Now, another thing that you can do is you can run all of the lines in a code chunk all at once. So the way to do that, there's two ways actually. So one is I can put my mouse on any of the lines here, and if I wanted to just run that one line, line 15, then I would click here, Run Selected Lines. But if I want to run all 4 lines in the chunk, that's right here, Run Current Chunk. And I can just click on that. Now, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you another way you can run the entire chunk, which is my favorite way, which is you can click this little play button, this green play button at the top right of the chunk. And that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to push it, and here we go. We see that everything in this code chunk was sent to the console over here. So once again, the setwd command was sent, which is fine. Then line 14 was sent, line 15 was sent, the package was loaded, and then line 16 was also sent to the console, and we know that it was executed correctly because now in our environment in the bottom left where my mouse is, we now have the data set called D successfully loaded into RStudio for us to use. One thing I want to point out is that an R code chunk can contain either just one line of code, as in this first chunk up here in lines 8, 9, and 10, or it can contain multiple lines of code. It's completely up to you to customize it however you would like. And of course, this second code chunk that you see in the file contains more than one line. So that's a good reminder of that. Okay, I'm going to save my work. And then I'm down here to line 18 so far. Now I'm going to make some new empty lines. You can create new lines anytime you would like to keep things visually organized in a nice way for yourself. And now that I've loaded my data and set my working directory, two things you'll probably have to do every time you start a new analysis, I'm going to start a new section, just like we did in Microsoft Word. That section was called Introduction. So I've typed Introduction right there, and then let me type some text into the introduction section, which I just pasted, and it was pre-written. So again, we're making a document that's kind of like Microsoft Word documents in that you can type plain text directly into them like this, the way that you would make a new report about anything, whether or not it included any kind of data analysis. So you can type text here, and that's what I did. And then after that, what we can do is we can also add more code chunks so that we create a fully integrated document that not only has plain text and any commentary we wish to provide, but also our data analysis and the results of that analysis all in one place very conveniently. So the first thing I'll point out, after I made my empty lines here to keep myself organized, I typed introduction. Now, in Microsoft Word, what I had done, and I can show you, is I had created the introduction section. I chose to underline it to show that, this is the start of a new section. The way you do that in an R Markdown file is you put this £1 or hashtag symbol at the start. That tells the computer, hey, this is the start of a new section. Then after that, I have this space. That space is very important. Make sure you always have a space, and then whatever I want to label that section, which in this case is introduction. Okay, and then underneath that, I give a one-line space here in line 22. You can give more lines of space if you want. It's totally up to you, but make sure you give at least one, and then write whatever you want. And each paragraph will come out separately. So basically, make sure you have a one-line break between any separate paragraphs that you wish to have in your final document, which you'll see an example of at the end of this video, and then just keep writing. Now, my introduction section is done, and of course, I'll note that the data I'm using as an example in this video came from this source in line 27 that you can see on your screen. So thanks to them for providing that data. Now what I want to do, and this is the more exciting part coming up, is we want to make a new section called Data Analysis. So I've done that right there. I'll save my work. All right, and I'll save my work. There we go. So in this new data analysis section, let's say I add this text right here. Okay, I'm explaining what the data analysis section is going to do. Then I'll create some new lines. In fact, I'll create a lot of new lines because I want to have some space to work. And then I'm going to add 2 pound signs. And this initiates a subsection within the data analysis section. So this is the data analysis section in line 33 that we initiated, as well as the introduction section we created in line 21. Those are level 1 sections, or level 1 headings, we can call them. 37, line 37, this is going to be a level 2 heading, a subsection within the data analysis section. I'm going to call this section Tables and Descriptive Statistics. And then here in line 39, So I'm going to give a blank line in line 38 as we demonstrated above. In line 39, I'm going to write some text to my reader about what's going to happen in this section. And there's that text right there in my new subsection, Tables and Descriptive Statistics. I'm explaining this section is going to report some tables and descriptive statistics. Then I'm saying to the reader, hey, look, I'm about to show you a table, about the distribution of products across cities, right? That's one of the variables in this example data. So I'll save my work, and then I will insert a new R code chunk. And now I'm ready to put R code right here in line 44, which is what I'll do now. And you can see here in line 44 that I have put some code to create a table. Now I can run that code. And remember previously when we ran this code in lines 13 through 16, there was no need for the computer to reply back to us. You can see in the console on the right, those commands are still there, and the computer didn't have anything to say back to us. It just gave us this blue arrow again, which is fine. It means that the computer is ready to do more work for us. But now what we'll be running in line 44, this command actually does give us an output, which you'll see in a moment. So I'm going to run this code chunk by clicking on the play button here. So line 44 has now run. Once again, line 44, that code was sent to the console for us, and this time we got a reply where I'm moving my mouse on the right side. We got the table we were trying to generate. In an R Markdown file, unlike an R script file, the output of any of our R code also shows up within the file itself on the left. And then you have options to collapse it. You can click on these little arrows to collapse it. Then it becomes this little bar, but it's still there for later. You can get it back by again clicking like I just did. Or you can choose to click this X, which will just get it out of the way. So it's totally up to you what you'd like to do once you've run the code. But just note that you'll receive the code, you'll receive the output, both on the left in your R Markdown file and on the right in the console. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to keep creating my document. And so if you've already gotten the hang of this, you can skip ahead in the video, sort of skim through, but I'm going to keep describing everything in detail as we create an entire document together. So what I'll do now is I'll type some text here in line 47, which interprets the results of the table that are going to appear right above. And note that I left line 46 blank for good spacing. So, and you can even put 2 spaces as I just did. Let's create some more blank lines to give ourselves room to work. Okay, so that's what we did. We interpreted the table. And what I'll do next is I'll save my work, and then I'll write some text here explaining what I plan to show the reader next. So once again, this portion of our document is just like something we might type into Microsoft Word. But this portion of our document contains R code that we can use for data analysis, and that will be embedded right into the final document we create. And you'll see that later in this video. Okay, so what I'll do now is, as I wrote here, I plan to display some descriptive statistics. And to do that, I need R again. So I create a new R code chunk right here. And then I put a new command right there in line 53. And this is the summary function. This is telling the computer that I want to create a summary output of the variable called unit price, which is one of the variables within the data set D. Okay, so my code is ready, and I can run it, and then I get this output, both on the left as well as in the console on the right. And since I have that in the console on the right, for now I'm going to collapse this output right there, but I know that if I want to, I can always get it back like this. Or I can look at it in the console. Okay, great. Now what I'll do is in line 56, I'll type whatever it is I want to write about the summary output in line 53. And that's what I want to write, some interpretation for my reader to see. All right, so let's say I'm done with that section. That section was for descriptive statistics and the two-way table that you saw. Now I'm going to make a new subsection called charts. Okay, so this is where I want to make some visualizations to show my reader. Now remember, I put two pound signs right here for charts. So this means that I want the new section called charts to actually be another subsection within the data analysis section, right? So the level 1 heading with the 1 pound sign in line 33 shows that this is where I'm making a brand new section in the document. That section called data analysis contains two subsections. One of those subsections is tables and descriptive statistics, which we just finished writing. And the next one is called charts. So now in line 60, again, I'll give 59 as a blank line. Oh, and I'll also point out, remember that I put a space here in between the pound signs and the title I want to give this new subsection. That space right there is important. Now in line 60, I'm back in my Microsoft Word frame of thinking where I can write any plain text that I would like. So I'll do that now. I'll describe what it is I want this subsection to be about. And what I'll put in line 60 is this text right here, and then I'll save my work. So I've said to the reader we're going to start showing some charts, and then I've explained what it is the first chart is going to be, which is, in this case, a scatter plot. And then I'll create some new empty lines, and then I will insert an R code chunk where I can put whatever data analysis code I wish. And in this particular case, I've decided to put the code par mar equals C1111. We won't talk about this code in line 66 in detail, but just keep in mind that this is sometimes a line of code that can help you plot your data more effectively. So it's not always necessary to run line 66. 66 does not need to be there, but I'm just taking this opportunity to point out that if you ever have trouble with a plot or plot-related function, something you can try running before you run that plot-related function is you can try running this line of code here in line 66. So, of course, we'll run both of these lines simultaneously. Line 67 is just saying to the computer, we want to create a scatter plot with the variable quantity on the x-axis, meaning the horizontal axis, and we want unit price to be the variable on the y-axis or the vertical axis. And of course, we have the $$ notation here before each of the variables to tell the computer that these two variables can be found within the data set, which is called D. All right, so let me run these two lines of code by running the entire chunk right here. Click. Okay, great. And so what we got is a scatter plot right here. And in this case, it did send the code to the console, but it did not display it in the console. If I wanted to, I could click here in the console. I'll push the up arrow key to get that most recent code back. And of course, I can push the up arrow key many times to scroll through recent commands. Now I can push the down arrow key again to go back down through the recent commands. All right, here. So if I run the plot command, aha, here we go. This was demonstrated. Error in plot new figure margins too large. I need to run this par function once again. And now let me run the plot function. And here it gave me my plot on the bottom right, as it would have if I had run line 67 from an R script file. So these are multiple ways to display your output, but no matter what you do, make sure that all of your code is also somewhere written into your R Markdown file on the left, and that your work is saved, as I'm doing now. Click right there. Good. So now, as you can see, I have the scatter plot on the left. Let me collapse that, save it for later, and I can look at it on the right if I want to as well, but I don't want to right at this moment, so I'll go back to my Files tab here, and I'll make this small again. Okay, now in line 71, let's say, I will write some interpretation about the plot that I just created. All right, and let me put that text right now over here. So here I interpreted the scatter plot that is going to appear right above when we eventually create our final nice looking document. And then I also added this text here in line 73, explaining what I plan to show the reader next. And so now I'm going to click on Insert, R, I'll get a code chunk, and again, I've written that I want to make some box plots. So now I will bring in the code for the box plots. And here you can see I have written in lines 76 and 78 the commands to generate two separate box plots, which we will go through in a moment. So one thing to point out here is that I already said you can have multiple lines of code within an R code chunk. Another thing is that you can have empty lines within an R code chunk, and it won't mess anything up. So it can help you stay organized to insert empty lines within your code, as I've done here. Okay, so let me run these lines of code individually, in fact. So first I'll run line 76, which is a box plot command, and I'll go here, run selected lines, click. So now it ran and gave me just this one box plot. Now I can click on line 78, and I can run just that line, run selected lines. There we go. Now I got a different box plot from line 78. Now let's see, what if I had clicked here to run the entire chunk, to run both lines of code, one after the other. I'm going to click, and what you see here is that the computer did run both lines of code, and since each line of code involved the output of a different figure of some kind, it created this interface here. So I can click, and I can switch between the two plots. So let's start with a discussion of the first plot. The first plot is a box plot showing the quantity of observations, which in this case I believe are individual sales. And each sale, the quantity of each sale, is now broken down by the city in which that sale occurred. And there are 4 cities in the data set. And this has created a separate box plot for the observations, meaning the rows in my data sheet. There are 244 rows or observations in my data sheet. It created a separate box plot for observations in each of these cities. So it was a very quick way for me to visualize any differences across cities in the quantity, which is another variable. Quantity is another variable in this data set. Okay, and let's look at the code that generated that plot, line 76. So I used the box plot command, which told the computer I want to make a box plot. Then I'm saying to it, take the variable quantity and break it up by city. And this notation with this squiggle right here is a notation that will become more and more familiar to you as you do more data analysis in R and R Markdown. Basically, this is saying that quantity is the outcome we care about, so put that on the y-axis, meaning the vertical axis, and city is how we want to break our data apart. And so we put that on the x-axis or horizontal axis right here. And then we write data equals D. That tells the computer where the variables quantity and city can be found. And now let's do a quick review of line 78. Line 78 says to the computer, hey, we just want to make a box plot of a single variable without breaking it up by groups in any way. So in this case, we say we want to make a box plot of the unit price variable, which can be found within the dataset D. So then we just use the familiar D notation right here, and then we select the unit price variable and put that in the box plot function. And that's it. That's all we need to do. Then we get this box plot right here. Now, one thing to note about line 76 is that remember that each box plot, even for the command in line 78, the box plot itself, each individual box plot, each of these 4 individual box plots that are shown in this one diagram, those are made based on continuous numeric data. But, so the variable quantity, for example, and the variable unit price, those are both continuous numeric variables. The variable city is not numeric. It's qualitative or categorical, or in the language of R, it's a factor variable. So city breaks our data up into categories, which are qualitative categories. Boston, Los Angeles, New York, San Diego, those are qualitative data that have been labeled to each observation in our data set. So I'm just pointing out that we could not have written necessarily a continuous numeric variable here, because then the computer would have drawn lots and lots of little box plots, and it would have been confusing and not very useful to us. What I'll do now is I'll save my work, of course. I'll collapse these box plots that we got. And then now I'm in line 83, I'm outside of my R code chunk. Now I can just type whatever I would like in plain English text or another language. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type an interpretation of the box plots that will be displayed above, because that's what might happen in a real project report or research report. Okay, great. And then another thing that might happen, just to demonstrate the entire process, is we might finish our document with a section called conclusion. So I've put that in here. I've used in line 85 a single pound or hashtag with a space and then the word conclusion to show that I want to create a new level 1 section called conclusion. And now in line 87, I can type my conclusion. All right, and I'll put my conclusion there now. Here we go. There it is. So now I have finished authoring this document, and this document contains plain English text that I want my reader to read, just like they would read if I made a Microsoft Word file and sent it to them. But integrated into that file, which contains my plain English text, I also have my R code, and I have this output, and this output will show up in a final exported file that we're about to create here together. Now, very quickly, before we move on to that final step, there are a couple of things I want to point out. Now, one command, for example, that you might be familiar with, and that I'll show you right now, again, is the view command, right? So let's say you want to view your data, for example. You can type the view function, and then you can type the name of your data, which in this case is D. And now let me run this line of code. And as you may be familiar with, running the view command pops up this data viewer to look at your data. Okay, So that's good, and that's very convenient. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you're making an R Markdown document, our eventual goal is to create a final document that's exported and looks nice. You can't have a data spreadsheet in the middle of that. There's no way for that to happen, right? You can't imagine you're making a Microsoft Word document and then all of a sudden you want to insert a huge spreadsheet into that document. You can't do it. And furthermore, this command is programmed in line 86. It's programmed to pull up a data viewer. That can't happen in some other document that we're about to create. So the point I'm making is a command like the view command, you should not have that run inside your R Markdown document. So the easiest way that you can solve this problem, there's a couple of things you can do. One thing is, if you want, and what I'll do now, is you can remove the R that used to be there. I'll demonstrate that again. An R code chunk has these 3 tick marks, and then inside of the curly brackets, the letter R. If you delete the curly brackets and the R, it becomes a different type of chunk. It just becomes a chunk of formatted text that gets highlighted in the final document, but it's not going to be run by R. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is you can click on these settings and you can say show nothing, don't run code, for example. Here we go. Apply. And it added some instructions to the computer for this chunk of code right up here. It added eval equals false. That means do not evaluate, do not run any lines of code inside this chunk. And then it says include equals false, which means don't even display this. Don't display the code and don't display any results. So there are more advanced options like these that you can modify and learn more about as you continue your work in RStudio and using R Markdown. Okay, the other thing I'll demonstrate is another command that you may have used before may involve a question mark. So let's say I want to find out information about the empty cars dataset. I can type question mark empty cars, and I can run that line. And as you see in my RStudio here, this viewer popped up to read about empty cars. This is another example of a command that you should not include in your R Markdown file, or if you do include it in your R Markdown file, make sure that it's within a separate code chunk that says eval equals false. Okay, so that's just one thing I wanted to review. Now we'll turn to the issue of actually creating a final document that looks nice, which is the most exciting part, of course. Now that I'm ready to create my final document and I've written everything that I want to into my R Markdown file on the left, I'll go back to Files over here so that I can see my Files viewer. And then what I'm going to do, and what you will need to do on your computer, is you see this button right here for knit. And there's a little down arrow next to that. Let's click on that down arrow. And the first thing we'll do is we'll click knit to HTML. And I'll click that right now. And what should happen is, as it did on my computer, on the top left, okay, so that disappeared for a moment. Let's go back and look at that. On the top left, typically the console is displayed as it is now. While my R Markdown file was knitting, we remember we pushed the knit button here. Knitting is another word for exporting. As my R Markdown file was knitting or exporting, in this console viewer box, the R Markdown tab popped up. And so you can see here, it says it created this file for us. And you can also see that within the files in my working directory, meaning my folder where I'm doing my work, this new file is there at the bottom right of the screen, example R Markdown Jan 2021. So a new HTML file was created just now. We just created it ourselves. And remember, an HTML file is the type of file that's typically looked at in a web browser. Now, everything happened so quickly when I pushed the knit to HTML button, as you'll recall. And so what had happened was this viewer popped up to preview the HTML file that was created. And I'll make it a little bigger, and now we can look at it together. What you see here is that everything that I had done in the R Markdown file is now documented in this in this HTML file. So everything I created, everything I wrote into this R Markdown file, this file is called an R Markdown file, RMD. This contains things like the header, my code, as well as the plain text that I want to see in my final file. So this is the RMD, or R Markdown file. We used the RMD file to create this HTML file. And you can see that this HTML file shows all of the code chunks that I created. It nicely formats the start of each new section. It puts all of my text here in separate paragraphs that I wrote. It then creates the new data analysis section. It creates the subsection that's within the data analysis section. Then the first code I had written there was this table. Then the table is displayed here underneath it. And then here's the commentary I had written. So imagine we had been making this in Microsoft Word. You would have to make all these separate sections. You would have to type this text. That's what Microsoft Word is already good at. But then, how would you get this code and this output into Microsoft Word? Well, that would be pretty tedious. You would have to perhaps copy and paste it one at a time into Microsoft Word. Whereas through RStudio, using an R Markdown document, we were able to just very easily create a large document with a whole bunch of code and output and charts that we wanted. And now one thing you'll notice is that this code chunk right here, where I had written eval equals false, include equals false, that code chunk does not appear here in this document anywhere, which means that the computer obeyed these instructions that we gave it here in line 85 to essentially ignore this chunk of code. So that's also nice. If you're ever writing some code and it doesn't work, but you want to have it for reference later, you can just write eval equals false and keep it in your file in case you need to refer to it later, but it won't show up in your final knitted file, meaning your final exported file. Okay, I'm going to close this now. And let's quickly look at one other thing. So back in my files viewer in the bottom right, if I want, I can click, that's a left click. If you have that option on the computer, it gives me two options, open in editor or view in web browser. So if I click view in web browser, it will open this HTML file, meaning the output of my R Markdown file. It will open that output in my web browser on my computer, which I won't demonstrate right now. And instead, what I'll turn to is that if we go back to the knit menu here, in fact, let me go to the top of the document. Right now, we have output written as HTML document. If we go to the knit menu again, another thing we can say is knit to Word. And I'll click that right now. And again, you see quickly on the top right, it's running. It's a very short file, so it ran very quickly. Now what my computer did is it opened a new Microsoft Word file. This is the Microsoft Word file, which was generated just now from my R Markdown file. So what's great is that, let's say you spend some weeks or months doing some kind of analysis in R Markdown because you need to try lots of different things. Then eventually, once you're certain that you're finished with everything you need to do for your data analysis, then if you want, you can click the knit button and make a Microsoft Word document like I just did. And then you can edit the text in the Microsoft Word document if you need to, or you can delete or rearrange certain things. It's much easier than one at a time copying and pasting things over into Microsoft Word. So all of what we're trying to achieve relates to, customizability, essentially, and having this output be the way we want without much headache. So as you can see, the same document came out here, but this time in Microsoft Word. So let me go back to RStudio and point out that the Word document appeared in my folder. So again, just like the HTML document, you can see them right next to each other here in my files viewer. Both of them are now on my computer in this folder, which is called Project 1. And of course, your folder will be named whatever you might have called it. These files can be emailed, for example, or they can be uploaded to a website. So if you're doing an assignment for my class, you can upload into our course Dropbox for assignments. You can do an assignment in R Markdown, which is what you're required to do, and then you can upload one of these files. You can choose which one, HTML or Word or PDF, which we'll make in a moment. Upload it to the course website, and that's what we will look at to see your homework assignments, because then we can see whatever text you've written, plain English text, we can see the code you wrote, and we can see the output you got all in one place. Okay, the final thing we will look at is we will look at making a PDF file. This can sometimes be the hardest one to create. So I'm going to click on knit to PDF. It's running. We'll wait a little bit. It takes a little bit longer to make the PDF. And here a PDF viewer has appeared. And we can zoom in, of course. This is a PDF viewer from RStudio itself. Here, now this is formatted like this. It's the same content, but now it's as a PDF. And you can email or upload this wherever you would like. It's the same file. So let me close this and show you that in the bottom right files viewer at the bottom here, where my mouse is, this new document we just created has now appeared as well. Now, one thing I want to point out is that when you yourself are making a PDF file on your computer for the first time, there's a chance it might not work. Because in order to generate a PDF file, you need a few additional capabilities and packages installed on your computer. So if you do run into trouble on your computer creating a PDF file, first of all, it might be fine for you to just ignore that problem. You still have the HTML file and you have the Word document. Those might be more than enough. You might also be able to create a PDF file from your Word document. So those are some options you have. But if you do want this PDF functionality to work and it's not working right now, one thing you can do, and I'll put it in our code chunk here, where it's not going to run, you can install a package called TinyTech. This package right here. You can use this code to do it, and then go ahead and run this line. I won't do that right now, but you can go ahead and run this line to install the package. Then once again, and I'll save my work, then once again, click on the knit menu, knit to PDF, and see if it works. I think there's a good chance it will, but also don't get frustrated if it doesn't. There'll be a way to work it out. The final thing I want to point out in this video is that as we were clicking on the various knit options here, the computer was slightly modifying our header at the top here, and it was creating separate sections within the header, within the output portion of the header, for these three types of documents. And as you use R Markdown more, you might find that you actually have sub-options within each of these outputs, which is not something we're going to demonstrate today, but it's just something for you to take note of, that you do have the option of adding more instructions to the header within each of these output types in the future if you wish. Okay, so I'll bring this rather long video to a close. Hopefully it was helpful to you to get acquainted with R Markdown. If you're watching this video on YouTube, then a link allowing you to download the R Markdown file that we created together in the video, a link to that file is in the description. And if you're a member of my course, then you can access that file through our online learning materials, as well as other commentary that you'll see related to the construction of this file. Thanks for watching.